This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Hey listeners, this is Peter and welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts, every language on Earth has a word for the deliberate killing of a political figure. In English, that word is assassination. In French, assassinat. In Spanish, asesinato. In Arabic, the word is qatilun, but the people who gave the world the root of all these words did not, as far as historians can determine, call themselves assassins at all. The word was given to them by their enemies. It was almost certainly an insult. And the most popular theory about what it means, that it refers to hashish, the drug supposedly used to manipulate a cult of killers, is almost certainly wrong. The people who gave the world the word assassin were a medieval Shia Muslim sect called the Nizari Ismailis, and the real story is far more interesting than the legend that replaced it. Our history brief today returns to History is Weird and why forks took centuries to catch on. A quick word from our sponsors. This day in history. On August 20th, 1619, the first recorded Africans arrived in the English colony of Virginia aboard an English privateer. Their arrival marked the beginning of a system of racial slavery that would profoundly shape American history. On August 20th, 1977, NASA launched Voyager 2, beginning a mission that would explore the outer planets before continuing into interstellar space, where it remains today. Story of the day. The word assassin enters European languages through the Crusades. Crusader chroniclers, encountering the Nizari Ismaili in Syria and hearing accounts of them from their Muslim opponents, recorded a word that sounds, in its various medieval spellings, like hashishia, hashish users. The derogatory implication was clear. These were people so beyond the pale of normal Islamic society, so fanatical and so irrational that their behavior could only be explained by some form of intoxication. The problem with this explanation is that no contemporary Islamic source, and the medieval Islamic world produced meticulous historians, by the way, describes Nizari operatives using hashish before carrying out missions. The hashish theory appears in hostile sources only, written by the Nizari's enemies, and in the sensationalized account of Marco Polo, who visited the region a century after this sect's power had already been broken and reported, with his charismatic flair for the extraordinary, that the Nizari leader maintained a secret garden of paradise where young men were drugged and then given a vision of heaven and then sent out to kill, motivated by the promise of returning to that paradise in death. Now, that is a great story, but there is no contemporary evidence that any of this is true. The more likely etymology of hashishia, several modern scholars have argued, is simply a term of abuse, meaning the riffraff, the rabble, the socially marginal, the kind of epithet that powerful institutions have always applied to their opponents. The people called assassins did not call themselves assassins at all. They simply called themselves Nizari Ismaili. And understanding who they were requires understanding the Islamic world that they emerged from. The Nizari Ismaili were a branch of Shia Islam, one of the most significant and most complex divisions in the history of the faith. The split between Sunni and Shia Islam originated in a dispute over succession after the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 CE. Shia Muslims believed that the leadership of the Muslim community belonged to the Prophet's family, specifically to Ali, the Prophet's cousin and son in law, and to his descendants, who held the title of Imam. Over the following centuries, the Imamate theology produced several further divisions, disputes over which line of succession was legitimate. The Nizari Ismaili emerged from one such dispute in 1094 CE when the Fatimid Caliphate of Egypt, then the most powerful Shia political entity in the Islamic world, split over the succession to the imamate. One faction supported Nizar. Their opponents prevailed in Egypt. Nizar's supporters, the Nizaris, found themselves a religious minority without a state, surrounded by hostile Sunni powers, and a Fatimid leader that had rejected their claim. In that precious position, they needed a strategy for survival. Their strategy was Alamut. Hassan Isaba was a theologian and a political organizer, and one of the most extraordinary figures of the medieval Islamic world. In 1090, he captured a mountain fortress called Alamut, the Eagle's Nest, in the Alborz Mountains of what is now northern Iran. Alamut sat at an altitude of 6,000 feet, on a narrow ridge with sheer drops on most sides. It was, by the standards of the era, nearly impregnable. Hassan built it into the headquarters of a movement, and around it, over the following decades, the Nizaris established a network of mountain fortresses across Persia and Syria, each one chosen for defensibility, each one connected to Alamut by couriers and shared doctrine. The strategy was clear. A religious minority that could not field armies comparable to the Sunni powers around it needed a different form of power. What Hassan developed was targeted killing, the assassination of specific political and military leaders whose removal could alter the balance of power without requiring conventional warfare. The operatives who carried out these killings, called fidai, meaning those who sacrificed themselves, were not, as the legend suggests, drugged fanatics motivated by promise of paradise. They were trained agents, often deployed over months or years, who sometimes lived undercover in target communities for long periods before acting. Their operations were selective and strategic, not random terror, but really calculated political violence aimed at specific objectives. Several of the most powerful rulers of the medieval Middle East, the Sunni caliphs, crusader leaders, Seljuk sultans, came to regard the Nizaris as a serious and lasting threat. Some sent assassins of their own against Hassan, but none succeeded. The legend of the assassins traveled to Europe largely through crusader accounts and Marco Polo's narrative. By the time it arrived, it had been transformed. The strategic sophistication of Nizari political violence had become a cult of drug induced fanaticism. The genuine theological complexity of Ismaili Shiism had become the sinister mysticism of a secret society. The mountain fortress had become a den of killers for hire. The historical reality, a religious minority using unconventional means to survive in a hostile political environment, had been replaced by something more satisfying to a medieval Christian imagination than that needed the Islamic world to be irrational and monstrous. Alamut fell to the Mongol armies of Hulagu Khan in 1256. The library and observatory Hassan Isabah had built there, one of the finest in the Islamic world, were all destroyed. Most of the Nizari fortress networks fell in the same Mongol sweep. The sect survived. The Nizari Ismaili community still exists today, led by Aga Khan, and numbers in the millions across South Asia, as well as Central Asia. They are not assassins anymore, because they kind of never were, in a way that at least the legend claims. They were just a religious minority that survived by being more tactically sophisticated than their enemies, and whose name, stripped of context and distorted by hostile sources, became the word every language on earth now uses for political murder. Words carry histories. This one carries a very long one, and almost none of it is what people think. The History Brief. Take a look at the table next time you eat dinner. Knife, spoon, fork. You probably won't give any of them a second thought. But here's something strange. For most of human history, people did not use forks. In fact, when forks first appeared in Europe, many people thought they were ridiculous. Some even believed they were, well, sinful. So, why did it take centuries for one of the most ordinary utensils in the world to become so accepted? The answer begins in the Byzantine Empire. Small two pronged forks were used by wealthy people as early as the first millennium. They gradually spread into Italy through trade and royal marriages. But when one Byzantine princess arrived in Venice around the year 1004, she caused quite a stir. Instead of eating with her fingers like everyone else around her, she used a tiny golden fork. People were horrified. According to one medieval church writer, God had already given humans natural forks. Their fingers. Using a fancy metal utensil to eat was seen as unnecessary, vain, and even an insult to God's design. When the princess later died of illness, some religious leaders claimed it was divine punishment for her excessive luxury. Talk about a bad restaurant review. Anyway, for centuries afterward, most Europeans continued eating with their hands, aided by knives and spoons. That wasn't considered rude. In fact, there were elaborate rules about how to eat with your fingers politely. Forks remained rare and were mostly found in the homes of the very wealthy. Then, during the Renaissance, attitudes began to change. Italy embraced forks first, especially for eating long strands of pasta without making a complete mess. As Italian fashion, art, and dining customs spread across Europe, forks slowly became fashionable too. Even then, not everyone was convinced. When forks arrived in England during the early 1600s, some people mocked them as unnecessary Italian invention. One English traveler proudly declared that he didn't need a fork because God gave me fingers. Others joked that anyone using a fork was trying too hard to appear sophisticated. Eventually, though, practicality won, and forks made eating easier and obviously cleaner. They kept greasy fingers off expensive clothing. They worked well with increasingly elaborate food choices. And by the 18th century, they had become standard tableware across much of Europe. Today, it's almost impossible to imagine eating dinner without one, which makes it easy to forget that for hundreds of years, people looked at a fork the same way we might look at some strange new gadget today. Odd and unnecessary. I know, history is weird. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today and helping make this little show such a mighty success. If you're enjoying this show and would like to help with its production, you can always donate a few dollars at buymeacoffee.com or become a Patreon member to enjoy these episodes ad-free. Both links can be found on our website at www.historyshortspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out our YouTube channel where we have different series that are not part of this main feed. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you all again tomorrow.
A flawless makeup look starts with the right foundation shade. Sounds simple, right? But finding your perfect match can honestly be one of the hardest parts of your routine. But there is good news. Sephora has all the best brands in one place, with so many shades, finishes, and coverage options to choose from. Plus, their beauty advisors, shade matching tools, and free samples make it so much easier to find the one that's just right for you. Visit Sephora and find your match.